Good morning. My name is Ronen Vengosh. I'm VP of Platform and Ecosystem for Egnyte. And with me here today is Dustin Avol from Smartsheet. We're here to talk about partnerships and ecosystems. And first off, Dustin, let me just ask you, you're Director of Strategic Business Development at Smartsheet.
Yep.
What is the role? What does that entail?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Strategic business development, it falls into our product and product marketing sort of pillar at Smartsheet. And what I do is work with other companies that are in the technology in our ecosystem to explore areas where we can work together, where we might be able to go to market, to innovate, to allow some sort of alliance in the partnership of product and platform versus, say, like a channel resell. That doesn't fall under me, more just the alliance portion of things.
Got it. So, I've been with Egnyte for about 4 years now, and when I started out, I think my first week, I've met with your predecessor in the role at Smartsheet, and at the time, you guys were fairly small, about 200 or so people, and I think it's fair to say you guys have had some explosive growth in the last few years. You've gone public. You now have over 1,200 employees worldwide. That's all great, but what I'm interested in is what was the contribution of the partner ecosystem and the partnerships organization to that growth, if you can share some of that with us.
Yeah, you're pretty right on. I mean, I've been at Smartsheet now for about 2 years, and we've doubled in size of employees and expanded into international areas and have an office in London now and in Edinburgh, Scotland, and in Boston. And our headquarters is still based in Bellevue, where the vast majority of our partners, where our employees are, but our partnerships have expanded worldwide as well. And with the expansion of users, we have to support them from a partnership perspective. So when we acquire so many more customers, and we're up to almost 80,000 different brands that are Smartsheet customers nowadays, the partnerships team both has to lead and also follow in terms of supporting those organizations. So we have tons of users that leverage just in the messaging platforms, whether it's Slack or Microsoft Teams or Hangouts chat or any other, Facebook Workplace, any other platform that these organizations are using. We need to go out and find a way to support that. And from a partnership perspective, it behooves us to be that neutral fabric to allow opportunities for our customers to do their jobs, to get their work done, which is really what we're doing with Smartsheet to help empower everyone to improve how they work.
Yeah, so we were talking briefly about this before we started the recording, but it's about kind of connecting the user's workflow and making sure that they don't have to switch contexts as they're kind of getting their work done. Tell us a little bit about how you guys try to accomplish that I guess, as part of your partner ecosystem.
Yeah, so I mentioned there kind of our vision at the end of my last statement, which is to empower everyone to improve how they work. And that's kind of a lofty goal, but the way that we see it in the collaborative work management market, which is kind of this area that the analysts are starting to call us or say where we play, is that knowledge workers, by and large, are driving how they get their job done. And what I mean by that is about 60% of the work that's out there is unstructured. The structured form of work, the 40%, is this lives in a CRM or an ERP or something that's very tangible and easy to report on, to be accountable, to share. But the other part, knowledge workers themselves, are being asked a lot of times by the organizations to find a way to get it done, and they go out and they find tools. So Smartsheet provides a better framework to empower those users to do that. So you're not just emailing spreadsheets around, but actually integrating those more structured forms with something like Smartsheet. So therein comes some of the automation and workflow that we want to support knowledge workers that don't always know that there's a way to get this done, that they don't need to have to code, that you don't need to require a scripting sort of methodology to enable an automation or a workflow of different disparate systems to help me get my job done versus the more technical user who's usually pretty well educated and well versed on the fact that, yeah, I can string a couple of apps together through some maybe simple code writing that goes well beyond my own expertise.
Let's talk a little bit about the business side of this. So, like Egnyte, Smartsheet has a large number of partners. Tell me a little bit about how you choose which partners to engage with, and then if you can share a little bit about what's the engagement mechanism. How do you work with partners on a regular basis?
So I think the key is always just to maintain a customer-led, customer-driven, customer-focused point of view. It doesn't really behoove anybody for me to come into the office one day and say, hey, I found this new application, we should partner with them, and we have no users and nobody interested in leveraging that integration. Yeah. It's all about really how can we better enhance the experience for our customers, be they current or future. And what I try to do in my role is look for more strategic solution driven. So even to the point where if there's one point-to-point connection that we can make, well, that's fine, and that might solve a couple of things, but I really want to look at solutions. How can we drive more use cases that allow customers to achieve more, accomplish more, drive their own businesses, and maybe that means some strategic value in new markets. When I say new markets, I don't just mean a geographical market. I don't mean a line of business. I don't mean a vertical. I mean all those things. I know we've done some work together on areas in architecture, design, engineering, construction type of vertical, or potentially in more ad content and media house, lines of business, being an area where Smartsheet and Egnyte can really deliver some solutions. And so those are the types of engagements that we look to offer and lean into with our partners. I think the challenge that I always come into is balancing that innovation versus customer feedback. And I'm continually reminded of this pretty well-known quote from Henry Ford, which was that if he had asked the people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Yeah. And so you have to make sure that you engage the customers, that they're involved. But at the same time, if they're just myopically viewed on what they want to accomplish, we might lose the opportunity to take that next step and innovate into a large organization. That's the balance that we try to straddle with the strategic partnerships.
And it's not just the customers, by the way. So we have similar discussions with our own product organization, right? Very often in the kind of role that we have, you have to make some bets, and do some things ahead of what the market is telling you that they want.
Right.
We were talking again before we started the recording about Facebook Workplace and how they've brought a major new platform to the market, and how we both decided to kind of make small investments to bet down and see what we can do there. Even though at the time there were no customers asking for this, they couldn't ask for it. They didn't know that it existed. How do you kind of make those decisions? What's the secret sauce to that?
That's a challenge. It's difficult. I mean, what we've started to do, and with an initiative that I've been working with a product manager counterpart in, is actually deriving a formulaic, programmatic, almost a scorecard to be able to help evaluate some of these opportunities. And it doesn't mean that it's black and white. In other words, if you had a scoring mechanism to say, if we evaluated an alliance and it scored above a 5, then we're going to do it. But it's just in gathering the data and being able to compare, much like we do with Smartsheet, right? It's being able to provide these customizable work that gets driven and compare it and report against it and share it to stakeholders, because that's ultimately what we have to do, right? We have to compare those business cases and then have a point of view and make a stand and say, well, this is the information that drives it. And that's, I think, the key is you make those decisions. There isn't a silver bullet. It's about, is this going to be a win-win opportunity for us and the partner? And it doesn't have to be an equal win-win, but is there benefit for both parties? It's not a zero-sum game. If we partner with somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything in the future is going to happen or won't happen for ourselves or anybody else. So it's more about taking the whole process into consideration and understanding why and how are we making these decisions and being able to validate them with evidence, with data, versus a simple black and white if-then, because I don't know that that's going to that's
Right,
going to happen.
and you know,
That's the challenge.
you talk about kind of the validation of data and so forth. I find that's always something that you strive towards. I often find that we have to make decisions even in the absence of data.
Oh, sure.
Sometimes there is a little bit of a dark art to it, where you're kind of making a call based on kind of your knowledge of the market, your understanding of trends, your understanding of the players. And yet, if somebody asked you to quantify
Yeah.
and kind of explain exactly why you did that, it would be very challenging.
Agreed.
Do you find that?
Absolutely. I mean, business development is sort of this combination of art and science. And I would add the experience into sort of the little cocktail that you just described on how
Yeah.
you make the decisions. The experience where you've seen these things happen before, you see where signs are pointing. And an opportunity often is something that you have to jump into a lot of times, and weighing the risks and what's the downside and things like that. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as a binary one or a zero all the time.
Yeah, no, and I think one of the interesting things about business development is that there's a fair amount of failure expected, right? I would say if your partnerships and your deals are all successful, it means you're being really conservative. You're not making enough kind of aggressive bets and moving forward. We talked a lot about kind of the product side of this, the user side of this, the engineering side of this. What about the business side? What do you guys look for from a business perspective in the partnerships that you're building? Are you looking to kind of go to market with folks? Or are you looking to grow the overall market? What is the intent?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above, really. I think each case is unique. Obviously, you don't want to get into a relationship with somebody that you don't see a long-term thing happening. So long-term solvency is something that's probably pretty important. Also, one of the things that I've noticed recently is at times you have to leverage your partner's partnerships, because the last thing you want to do is to get into a relationship in terms of a partnership or an alliance where that partner may be beholden to somebody else that might put your own partnership at risk if they're acquired, right? If your
Right.
partnership is acquired and then all of a sudden you're working with somebody that you hadn't agreed to in the first place, but through the magics of the market, it happened that way. So long-term trust and development, definitely something that's key. Go to market obviously is a goal. We're all about driving revenue and driving enhancements, driving customer experience, driving expansion, driving strategic value. A lot of times for me, it's engagement within the applications. Like you said before, how can we improve this back and forth switching of context, and where can we really ratchet this thing up so that 1 isn't 2, but it innovates, it changes the complete experience to something that we didn't even know about before. And from a business perspective, that comes to roost in larger opportunities and expansion into a segment of maybe even its own company where they weren't aware of our platform, of our offering, of our application, or a use case that it might open a door into that we might not have had by ourselves.
Right. You said something interesting here that made me think. You mentioned solvency as kind of a big component. I'm assuming you're referring to a situation where you partner with smaller companies, and the risk that they might not survive as an independent entity, and those risks certainly exist. How do you guys balance kind of the need to work with smaller vendors that are creating some really innovative and exciting solutions with that solvency risk? What do you guys do around that?
We've made a couple of small acquisitions in our own lifetime here at Smartsheet in the last couple of years. So we're not against not only working with smaller companies, but investing and even acquiring them. So that's an exciting opportunity as well, is to see value in, again, together are we something that we can't offer on our own? And is it something that either is going to enhance our own user experience, give access into a new market that we see as significant, or a feature that, it could be even a feature, something as small and sort of niche as a feature and not just a line of business that we want to develop. And in order to work with a partnership, that's going to accelerate it so much more than putting it on our roadmap and trying to prioritize with our resources and and perhaps either give a great recommendation or a great review from a large customer or large customers, or the opposite. So oftentimes customer feedback is huge, but I think it's more about what can we deliver together, and is that worth the investment in the partnership versus the investment in, it's like kind of a build versus buy
Right.
evaluation as well.
Yeah, you can't really build the whole thing.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the unique thing about kind of the cloud business is you are expected to work, with a large number of players, and we at Egnyte spend a fair amount of resources working with smaller organizations that bring a lot of really interesting innovation to market. A few names that come to mind: MX Hero for email, or TetraScience for life sciences. These are solutions that are kind of, these guys are going to be big one day, and you want to kind of engage with them early on and make sure that you're bringing the value that they're offering to your customers as well.
Yeah, I think, just to add to that, I think that one thing we try to maintain is we don't want to be all things to all people. We're going to do what we do in this collaborative work management, which is to, like I said, enable some of the customers to really manage the work that they're doing. And they're going to use their best of breed applications, especially given SaaS and cloud and all that, to do that. And given the nature of the cloud, applications are being developed and driven every day, and there's improvements, and there's companies going public. I'm just reminded of, I'm thinking of, like, for instance, Slack and Zoom as these
Right.
companies that are going public or about to go public in areas of business that are not new. It's not like messaging or chat, if you want to break it down to its most basic building block, and meeting technologies are new, but they figured out a new way to do it that leverages, and now there's a huge customer segment. So from the partnership perspective, we need to be open enough to allow integration and alliance with those opportunities, because they're going to continue to improve. It's never going to be a done deal and there's a
Right.
period at the end of the sentence. So you have to, I think, like you said, make some bets on the smaller players where you see the value or where you see a significant market opportunity.
All very good points. I want to switch us over for a second.
Yep.
We've talked about these smaller players. One of the defining features of the market today is that if we're talking about cloud, there's some giant players that are vying for dominance, right? It's AWS and Microsoft Azure and GCP Google, and a lot of us are trying to engage with these organizations, and I'm gonna give you guys credit here. I've modeled Egnyte's strategy for engaging with one of these partners who shall remain nameless on the strategy that you guys developed at Smartsheet. So I know you've got some interesting thinking around there. What is I guess the advice that you would give to mid-sized companies or smaller organizations that are looking to kind of engage with some of these major players? How do we not kind of get trampled? How do we select which partners to work with? What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, the one thing that I would recommend and maintain is have a point of view. Be your unique organization, right? You don't have to sort of submit to one of these larger players just because they are larger. There's a ton of benefit to be working with them, obviously, to draft off them, to stand on their shoulders and have a larger share of voice and items like that. But you also know your business better than anybody. So make sure that you come to that table with your own point of view and with your own value set and opportunities in mind. And there's different values for partnering, I think, with these different players, and not all things are equal. You've mentioned that we have a unique relationship with all three of those different providers, and it helps our organization and aids to our customer experience in three unique different ways. So there's benefits to be had from all three. So I think if I'm a mid or smaller, earlier stage organization, don't be afraid to get involved with some of those bigger players and go big or give it a shot but still with your own maintain your own identity, I think.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I think folks need to understand as they're kind of contemplating these engagements is that it's not a short-term
Right.
investment, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna work with these guys, and boom, you're kind of making a deep impact on the business and so forth. What has been your experience in kind of building these relationships, the time it takes to mature and what it takes to make it kind of be worthwhile?
Oh wow, it's so different across the board. I mean, I can speak, and time changes things. So Google, you mentioned, and G Suite, which is their productivity suite, right? Google Apps, as it was once called, is and was one of our first and oldest and initial partnerships. And we were lucky enough to be named recommended for G Suite. So we were sort of their project and program and process management application because Google themselves doesn't and didn't offer a solution there. And in the beginning days, that was like driving a quarter of our trials in the early days, and it's not that anymore. It's not even close to that anymore. And so things evolve. And whereas we haven't seen that same sort of opportunity or percentage of demand generated from some of the other partnerships, but some of the other partnerships allow us into maybe larger accounts that might be based on another platform, might be another cloud technology partner. And you can't, you said it right, you can't make a decision based on one opportunity. Business development is a long-term process that needs to drive trust in order to get to those go-to-market opportunities. We need to work together, usually for a while, and oftentimes in a costly manner, just because of the length of that relationship, in order to get to the point where, okay, we found our cadence. We've found how we can work in lockstep. And in some cases, it's different from others. For instance, we're now working with AWS because they've helped us get onto GovCloud and FedRAMP. So that's a unique opportunity that you sort of have to wait, and then jump on when you get the opportunity to act, rather than, especially something like FedRAMP and government compliance, which I know you guys know a lot about, is not always the opportunity that you can just sit there and knock on the door. You'll bang your head against the wall if it's not an open opportunity for you at the right time.
No, that's right. And I'm struck by something you said here, which is kind of, working with each of these vendors on different things, right? It's very possible to kind of pick an area where one of the players is stronger and kind of engage with them in an effective way, whereas most of your business you do, elsewhere. So what are some of the pitfalls in working with these larger players for a company our size?
Well, I mean, frankly, you can upset them. They're still giants of industry, right? Yep. And when playing a neutral position, if you're trying to be, Switzerland, that can be a challenge sometimes because organizations want commitment. They want to know that you're bought into the partnership, and for good reason. And a lot of times it's challenging for a smaller organization to do all things with all people at once, right? A lot of times you need to take a defined and definite steps to get there. In other words, using these three cloud players as a great example, I don't think that a company in a mid-size could say, we're going to go put our workloads on all three at once, because we don't have the people, the knowledge, the resources, maybe even the financial know-how to do all that. It may be a more measured step where we're going to do one, then we're going to do the other, then we're going to go, or whatever. And in some cases, those other partners might not like to see it that way. So you just have to be sensitive to that. And I think one of the main things about ecosystems and partnerships in general is open communication. Every partner that I work with, we always say, it's bad to get bad news, but it's worse to not know about the bad news and then hear about it, right?
For sure.
So just to keep the lines of communication open, I think is the number one sort of leave behind that I would have.
It's being honest. It's about explaining what your I guess not what your positions are, but what your motivations are, why you're saying what you're saying, and being very upfront about that, and explaining to folks that, hey, we know you want to work with us and you want us to work with you exclusive. It's not going to happen because we're a small company and we're going to bet on on many different things to be successful.
Right, and I want to service all of our customers, not just our customers that are your customers, but we want to service those as well. And I think you kind of hit on it, that answers a lot of these questions. How you evaluate relationships, partnerships, opportunity. It's all about this honest and upfront and motivation and understanding what the vision is behind it without getting a little too myopic on an opportunity to
Right.
launch at an event or develop one integration because one noisy customer wants it versus what's the effect on our business? What is this replacing in terms of priorities? How does this work on a timeline of a roadmap? Who's being affected by it? As long as you're upfront and open about all that, then it's a lot easier to work with partners. I mean, everybody is still, there's still people that you're working with, and quite often they have the same goals that you do. They're just in a different organization, and so it's easier to relate a lot of times.
Yeah, and the effort needs to be sustained, and you have to be persistent. I mean,
Yeah.
these things are years.
Oh yeah, it's
years
over
to kind
time.
of,
Yeah.
over years to kind of mature. So, Dustin, we're coming up on the end of our conversation today, and I just wanted to ask you for one piece of advice that you can give to folks that are kind of doing what we do. They're kind of maybe starting out kind of a new organization where they're trying to figure out what the partnership strategy should be, or maybe they've been doing it for a while and they're looking for the next big thing. What advice do you have for folks that are running partnerships and alliances in technology companies today?
Well, two things come to mind. One has been threaded throughout this conversation, which is understand it's more of a marathon than it is a sprint. Most of the best partnerships, I think, come from a lot of time working together and hacking away side by side at the stone before actually kind of breaking it, right? It's one of those ideals that it's every strike before the one that breaks the stone. It's not just that one last hit that broke
Yeah.
the stone, it's every one compounded upon each other. So understand that most often things are going to take longer than you think. And as I said before, it's not a zero-sum game. For me to win, you don't have to lose. We need to find areas where we can both benefit, and that doesn't need to be an equal benefit. And the other thing that I would say is if you're starting out in the business or you're interested in getting into the business, start to become a good storyteller. Because if you want to innovate, if you want to actually do things that people aren't picturing and seeing, you've got to develop a way to picture it and see it for them. You have to say, but wouldn't it be great if we could do this thing, whatever that thing is, and really tell that story and envision it and imagine it so that other people can experience it in their mind or in a product or before they can get there, because that's the way that you can be ahead of the market, you can deliver value and benefit to customers, to partners, before they can deliver it themselves, and then you become valuable for your own company and in the market in general. So really develop that storytelling muscle.
It's about explaining the value.
Yeah, right. And it's not a jargony like we're going to tie into this API and blah blah blah. No, it's more of what can you tell your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, your kids that makes them understand something about accomplishing a step or a value that you're driving, not just we're going to take this tool and integrate it here and this is how we're going to plug these two things together. So storytelling is huge, I think.
I completely agree. And with that, Dustin, thank you very much for joining us today. Dustin Avol from Smartsheet.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
And thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you soon.